Deitrick Haddon controversies, fame, faith, and redemption. When people talk about modern gospel music, one name that almost always enters the conversation is Deitrick Haddon. Known for blending contemporary sounds with traditional gospel themes, Haddon built a reputation as one of the most recognizable voices in inspirational music. His energetic performances, emotional songwriter, and willingness to push musical boundaries helped him stand out in a genre often rooted in tradition. But while his musical accomplishments earned him fans around the world, his personal life repeatedly became the center of public attention. Over the years, controversies surrounding marriage, ministry, family disagreements, and public feuds transformed him from simply a gospel artist into one of the most debated figures in Christian entertainment. For some supporters, Deitrick Haddon represents resilience, a man who made mistakes but continued striving toward growth and redemption. For critics, however, his controversies raised difficult questions about accountability, leadership, and the expectations placed on gospel artists. The contrast between his spiritual message and his highly public personal struggles created a complicated public image that continues to follow him today. This story is not simply about scandal. It is about fame, pressure, forgiveness, and the complicated reality of being a public figure in a faith-centered industry. Behind every headline was a man attempting to navigate relationships, career ambitions, ministry responsibilities, and public scrutiny all at once. To understand why Deitrick Haddon became such a controversial figure, it's important to first understand where he came from and how he rose to prominence in gospel music. Born into a deeply religious family, Haddon grew up surrounded by church culture and gospel traditions. Music played a major role in his upbringing, and from an early age he displayed a passion for performing and ministry. Unlike some artists who slowly entered the industry, Haddon quickly became known for his charisma and modern approach to gospel music. His sound appealed to younger audiences who wanted inspirational music with contemporary energy. He mixed R&B influences, urban production, and emotional storytelling into his work, helping him develop a unique identity within gospel music. While some traditionalists criticized his modern style, others praised him for helping gospel music evolve and reach new audiences. As his popularity increased, so did his visibility within the Christian community. He wasn't just viewed as a singer anymore. Many fans saw him as a spiritual leader and role model. That distinction would later become important because gospel artists are often held to much higher moral standards than entertainers in secular music. Throughout the early years of his career, Haddon and his wife, Deitrick Haddon, became one of gospel music's most admired couples. Together, they represented what many believers considered the ideal Christian marriage. They performed together, ministered together, and publicly displayed a relationship rooted in faith. For fans, their partnership symbolized stability and spiritual unity. Their chemistry on stage and in interviews helped strengthen their image as a power couple within gospel entertainment. Many listeners connected emotionally to their music because it appeared to come from authentic shared experiences. That is why news of their divorce shocked so many people. When rumors about marital trouble first surfaced, many fans hoped the reports were exaggerated. Gospel music audiences tend to become emotionally invested in artists they admire, especially when those artists openly discuss faith, marriage, and family values. But eventually the separation became public, and the reactions were intense. Some people sympathized with both parties, recognizing that marriage difficulties can happen to anyone regardless of faith or fame. Others, however, viewed the divorce as deeply disappointing because of the couple's public ministry image. The controversy intensified when details surrounding the breakup became more widely discussed online. Questions emerged about infidelity, timing, and personal accountability. Because both Deitrick and Deitrick had built careers centered around Christian values, fans and critics alike debated whether public spiritual leaders should be judged differently when personal issues arise. For many observers, the situation became more complicated when Haddon remarried relatively quickly after the divorce. Critics argued that the timing created the impression that emotional healing and reflection had been rushed. Supporters countered by saying that outsiders could never fully understand the details of a private relationship. Regardless of perspective, the remarriage dramatically shifted public opinion. Some longtime supporters struggled to reconcile the image of the inspirational gospel singer with the unfolding controversy. In faith communities, perceptions matter greatly, especially for artists whose music is tied closely to ministry and moral messaging. The criticism wasn't limited to gossip blogs or social media discussions. Church circles, gospel radio audiences, and Christian commentators openly debated the issue. Conversations about forgiveness, repentance, accountability, and public leadership became intertwined with discussions about Haddon's personal life. Yet despite the backlash, Haddon continued making music and performing publicly. In some ways, this only intensified scrutiny because critics believed he should have stepped away from the spotlight for a period of reflection. Others admired his determination to keep moving forward despite widespread criticism. The tension between public judgment and personal redemption became one of the defining themes of his career. As the years progressed, additional controversies added fuel to public discussions. Among the most talked about incidents were his public disagreements involving former associates, ministry associates, and even family members. One particularly controversial moment involved a diss track that drew attention across gospel entertainment circles. Diss tracks are common in secular hip-hop culture, but they are far less expected within gospel music. For many people, the incident felt shocking because it contrasted sharply with the spiritual image associated with Christian ministry. Some listeners viewed the track as emotionally honest and understandable given the circumstances surrounding personal betrayals and disputes. Others saw it as inappropriate and damaging to the integrity of gospel music. The incident highlighted a broader issue within faith-based entertainment, the collision between human emotion and public expectations of spiritual perfection. Unlike secular artists, gospel musicians are often expected to remain calm, forgiving, and composed at all times. Any display of anger or public conflict can quickly become controversial because audiences associate gospel music with spiritual maturity. For Haddon, these expectations created constant pressure. Every interview, social media post, and public appearance became subject to intense interpretation. Social media also played a major role in amplifying the controversies. In previous decades, personal struggles involving gospel artists might have remained relatively private. But in the era of viral commentary and online debates, every controversy spread rapidly across YouTube channels, blogs, Facebook pages, and entertainment sites. Fans analyzed interviews frame by frame, critics dissected social media captions, supporters defended him passionately while detractors questioned his credibility. The internet transformed personal matters into public spectacles. At times, Haddon appeared visibly frustrated by the criticism. In interviews and online statements, he sometimes defended himself strongly against accusations and assumptions. While some fans appreciated his honesty, others believed his responses occasionally intensified the controversy rather than calming it. Still, many people respected the fact that he rarely disappeared entirely from public view. Instead of hiding from criticism, he often addressed difficult topics directly. This willingness to confront controversy publicly became both a strength and a weakness. On one hand, it allowed supporters to see vulnerability and authenticity. On the other hand, it kept the controversies active in public conversations far longer than they might otherwise have lasted. Another important factor in understanding the Deitrick Haddon controversies is the broader culture surrounding gospel music itself. Gospel artists occupy a unique space between entertainer and spiritual representative. Fans often expect them to embody Christian teachings both on and off stage. This creates pressures rarely experienced by artists in other genres. When secular musicians experience relationship scandals or public conflicts, audiences may view the behavior as unfortunate but unsurprising. In gospel music, however, similar controversies can feel deeply personal to listeners who see artists as examples of faith. Because of this, Haddon's mistakes were not judged solely as celebrity scandals. Many people interpreted them as spiritual failures. That distinction significantly shaped public reactions. At the same time, supporters argued that expecting perfection from gospel artists is unrealistic and unfair. They emphasized that musicians, pastors, and public figures are still human beings capable of making mistakes. This debate became central to discussions surrounding Haddon's career. Should spiritual leaders be held to higher standards? Can someone continue ministering after public mistakes? What does genuine redemption actually look like? These questions extended far beyond one individual and touched on larger conversations happening throughout modern Christianity. As years passed, Haddon gradually shifted his public messaging toward healing, growth, and personal accountability. In interviews, he openly discussed pain, regret, and emotional struggles. He acknowledged mistakes and spoke about lessons learned through difficult experiences. One particularly significant moment came during a heartfelt public interview where he reflected deeply on his past controversies. Many viewers described the interview as emotional and sincere. Rather than appearing defensive, he seemed focused on transparency and growth. For some critics, the interview changed their perspective. They saw a man attempting to evolve rather than simply protect his reputation. Others remained skeptical, believing the damage done to relationships and ministry credibility could not easily be repaired. Nevertheless, the interview marked an important turning point in public perception. People who once viewed Haddon only through the lens of controversy began reconsidering the complexity of his journey. Discussions shifted away from simple condemnation toward more nuanced conversations about healing, accountability, and second chances. His story resonated with individuals who had experienced public mistakes, relationship failures, or spiritual struggles in their own lives. In many ways, his vulnerability became relatable precisely because it contrasted with the polished perfection often expected from religious figures. Meanwhile, his music continued evolving. Even amid controversy, Haddon remained creatively active, releasing songs that reflected themes of perseverance, faith, and emotional honesty. Some listeners believed his experiences added deeper emotional weight to his music. Pain has long influenced artistry across all genres, and gospel music is no exception. Many fans connected more strongly to songs that acknowledged struggle rather than pretending life was always perfect. This authenticity became one reason why Haddon maintained a loyal audience despite years of criticism. Still, controversies continued to affect his reputation within parts of the gospel industry. Certain listeners distanced themselves entirely, unwilling to separate the artist from the personal controversies. Others continued supporting him while recognizing his flaws. The divided reactions demonstrated how complicated celebrity redemption can be, especially within religious communities. Another major aspect of the public conversation involved the role of media itself. Entertainment blogs and YouTube commentators frequently covered Haddon's personal life in dramatic detail. Headlines often emphasized scandal over context, contributing to polarized public opinions. Critics argued that some coverage became exploitative, turning deeply personal situations into entertainment content designed primarily for clicks and engagement. Supporters believed the constant media attention sometimes prevented genuine healing because controversies were repeatedly reopened for public debate. At the same time, public figures inevitably face heightened scrutiny, particularly when their careers involve ministry and spiritual leadership. Many observers argued that accountability and transparency remain important, especially for influential personalities. This tension between privacy and public accountability remains unresolved not only for Haddon but for many religious celebrities. One reason the controversies surrounding Deitrick Haddon continue generating interest is because his story reflects broader societal themes. His journey touches on marriage, divorce, public judgment, forgiveness, masculinity, faith, celebrity culture, and emotional vulnerability. These issues resonate far beyond gospel music audiences. Many people see aspects of themselves in his experiences: failed relationships, personal regrets, public misunderstandings, or attempts to rebuild after mistakes. That relatability contributes to the enduring fascination surrounding his story. At the same time, others remain critical because they believe influential figures must accept greater responsibility for their actions. They argue that spiritual leaders shape public values and therefore should be held accountable when personal conduct conflicts with public messaging. This disagreement has no simple resolution. In many ways, the Deitrick Haddon controversies reveal more about society's expectations than about one individual alone. Audiences often want public figures to appear inspirational yet relatable, spiritually mature yet emotionally authentic, successful yet humble. Balancing all those expectations simultaneously can become nearly impossible. Despite everything, Haddon's longevity within gospel music remains remarkable. Many artists facing similar controversies might have disappeared from public attention entirely. Yet Haddon continued performing, recording, and maintaining a visible presence within the industry. Part of this endurance likely comes from his undeniable musical talent. Even critics often acknowledge his impact on modern gospel music. His ability to blend genres and connect emotionally with audiences helped shape contemporary gospel sounds for an entire generation. But resilience also played a major role. Throughout his career, Haddon repeatedly faced criticism, scrutiny, and public debate, yet he continued moving forward, adapting, and evolving publicly. Whether one views him sympathetically or critically, his story demonstrates how complicated redemption narratives can become in the modern media era. Today, discussions about Deitrick Haddon often involve two competing perspectives. One perspective focuses primarily on controversy, failed relationships, public disputes, and questions surrounding accountability. The other perspective emphasizes growth, humanity, and perseverance. Most likely, the truth exists somewhere in between. Human beings are rarely defined entirely by either their mistakes or their successes. Public figures, especially, often contain contradictions that cannot be reduced to simple narratives. For some fans, Haddon's willingness to discuss painful experiences openly makes him more relatable rather than less credible. They believe spiritual growth includes acknowledging imperfection and continuing to move forward. For others, the controversies permanently altered how they view his ministry and music. Both reactions reflect valid emotional responses shaped by personal beliefs, expectations, and experiences. As gospel music continues evolving, conversations about authenticity and accountability will likely remain central topics. Artists increasingly live under constant public observation, making personal struggles harder to separate from professional identities. Deitrick Haddon's journey illustrates both the opportunities and dangers of that reality. On one hand, vulnerability can create deeper emotional connections with audiences. On the other hand, public mistakes can overshadow years of artistic achievement. Ultimately, his story is not just about scandal. It is about the complicated intersection of faith, fame, humanity, and redemption. It is about how society responds when spiritual figures reveal human imperfections. It is about whether people truly believe in second chances or simply preach about them abstractly. And perhaps most importantly, it is about the reality that personal growth rarely happens publicly without criticism, misunderstanding, and pain. Whether admired or criticized, Deitrick Haddon remains one of the most talked about figures in modern gospel music because his life reflects struggles many people understand on a deeply personal level. His career serves as both a cautionary tale and a story of resilience. For supporters, he represents perseverance despite failure. For critics, he represents the dangers of blurred boundaries between ministry and celebrity culture. For observers caught somewhere in the middle, his story remains a complicated reminder that public figures are often far more human than audiences expect them to be. As conversations about faith, accountability, and redemption continue evolving, Deitrick Haddon's journey will likely remain part of those discussions for years to come. And perhaps that is why his story continues capturing attention, not because people simply enjoy controversy, but because beneath the headlines lies something deeply human: the struggle to rebuild identity, relationships, and purpose after public failure. In the end, the legacy of Deitrick Haddon may depend less on the controversies themselves and more on how people interpret the lessons that emerged from them. Some will remember the scandals, others will remember the music, and many will remember both. Thanks for the watching and subscribe.